That's what I thought too. A little bit two-turned.
Rearranging your setup.
Welcome to today's Hinckley Forum. My name is Ana Luisa Ramos, and I will be the forum host for today's conversation. The Hinckley Institute of Politics is a nonpartisan institute at the University of Utah. The Hinckley provides an array of transformative experiences for students through internships, forums, and classes. Hinckley forums seek to foster public discourse and civil debate on the most current and pressing issues, bringing in local, national, and international thought leaders. We want to thank the Utah Public Health Association for helping organize this forum. Today's forum is titled How to Manage a City, and we are excited to be joined by some great panelists. Gina Chamness has served as the Holiday City Manager since 2016, having previously spent 10 years working for Salt Lake City, integrating the mayor's policy objectives, handling budget issues, and developing new revenue sources. Before that, she served as the Director of Budget and Administration for the Sundance Institute. She is a University of Utah alum, graduating first with a BA in Political Science and Government, then completing her Master's of Public Administration. As Holiday City Manager, Ms. Chamness is the Chief Executive Officer of the city, managing all aspects of the administrative functions of the city. During Nicole Cottle's 23-year career with West Valley City, she has been a city attorney, community and economic development director, and assistant city manager. Ms. Cottle has extensive experience over many industries, often with a specific emphasis on crisis management. Ms. Cottle has practiced all types of corporate, municipal, transitional, and civil law. She has actively represented both public and private clients in various government relations at the state and federal level, and has worked often with legislators, regulators, politicians, and staff on a variety of different issues. Sarah Pierce serves as Deputy City Manager for Park City and brings more than 20 years of nonprofit, public administration, and leadership experience. As Sundance Institute's Managing Director, she oversaw administration and program operations, including the annual Sundance Film Festival, Sundance Film Festivals in London and Hong Kong. She also served as the Director of Salt Lake County's Arts and Culture Division, overseeing the administration and operations of Salt Lake County's premier performing arts facilities. Ms. Pierce has been honored with a Zions Bank Women's Leadership Award, and in 2018 was listed as one of 6 Women of the Year by Utah Business Magazine. Today's panel will be moderated by Hannah Garski. Hannah graduated from the University of Utah in 2017 with a BS in sociology and is currently enrolled in the U's MPA program. On campus, she serves as the president of PAGE, the Public Affairs and Global Enterprise Student Association, a student-based organization for MPA, MPP, and MIAJ students focused on promoting academic and career success for members, programming academic and social activities, and engaging our community through service. Please join me in welcoming our guests.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Hannah. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so we are so excited to have you all here today. If you wouldn't mind just first introducing yourselves and telling us how you came to your current positions and what those entail. Yes, go ahead.
I'll say that. Yeah. I'm Sarah Pierce. I'm Deputy City Manager for Park City. And I came to this position very organically. As they described in my bio, I was with Sundance Institute for 17 years, mostly focusing on operations and administration. Spent a lot of time in Park City, obviously, with the Sundance Film Festival, and got to know that place really well. Then I went to work for Salt Lake County for 3 years. So I got government experience, which I didn't have before. Government and nonprofit are very similar in structure in a way. And so those two pieces of experience combined made me a good fit for the Deputy City Manager job. So I applied and got it. And I've been there for 2 years. And it's super interesting. I really enjoy the new challenge of learning about government at this stage in my career, and I bring kind of different perspective because I hadn't been in government for very long. So it's great to be here.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for being here. Gina.
I'm Gina Chamness, and I'm the city manager in Holiday, and I had a fairly circuitous route to city management. As an MPA student, I don't know if you still have to select your areas of emphasis, and I rejected city management because at that point, average tenure was under 5 years, and I thought that is not what I'm looking for in a career. So I started working for the federal government and then worked for state government in Arizona. Tried some healthcare administration, a little nonprofit administration at Sundance, and then thought, well, what I really want is something a little more low-key, so I'll go work for a city, having no idea what I was getting myself into. It's probably the most intense of all of those areas. Close second is definitely nonprofit administration, but have really loved it. Spent a decade or so in Salt Lake City, and then the past 6 years in Holiday.
Nice. And Nicole.
Nicole Cottle, I'm with West Valley City. I came out of just luck. Is this okay? Does this sound a little weird to you guys? Okay, good. Right out of law school to West Valley, and was hired as a city attorney, but there were about 7 really seasoned city attorneys ahead of me. So first of all, I was really happy to have a job because at that time, which I won't tell you how long ago that time was, but it was a while now, the job market was really tough. So I was just so happy to have a job and just figured I'd learn from all these folks and then be on my way to whatever else was in my future. And practiced civil law for West Valley City for about 10 years. Mostly land use and real estate, but also economic development, and represented every other department during that time as well. Had great opportunities. Did a little bit of criminal work just because I wanted the opportunity to know what that was like, and quickly learned that that was not what I wanted to do. I'm not a courtroom lawyer by any stretch of the imagination. Learned that really fast. So then moved to economic development about 12 years in, 10 to 12 years in. And did that almost exclusively for 10 years with the city as well. And then about 2, maybe 3 years now ago was asked to be assistant city manager, and that's when my lawyer title shifted to general counsel. So really what that means is I do lawyering when everyone else can't or someone else really needs me to. And otherwise I don't do that. I do other positions as assigned, as we've talked earlier, and I'm sure we'll talk about today. So that's been my journey. I've been with the city now 23 years, almost 24.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for explaining what you do. So budgeting is a huge part of running a city and kind of organizing everything. So Gina, I know you used to be the finance director for Salt Lake City. So can you just kind of go over what the city budgeting process is like? And then if your cities are a little bit different, can you chime in and talk about that process?
Sure, and I think, you know, each city does have a different process, and it's going to vary depending on form of government as well. So Salt Lake City, with a strong mayor form of government, that budget was really developed using the policy guidelines and vision of whoever happened to be mayor at that time. I think that's a different process than is followed in a lot of other governments. But at its core, a budget is really about setting priorities, and that should merge the vision of your residents, the vision of your staff and department heads, of your council, and then of your executive. And that really involves, I mean, sure, it involves a lot of number crunching, spreadsheets, and evolving towards software that is much more user-friendly than those spreadsheets were. But really at the core of it, it is a conversation with those groups about what priorities are and how in an environment of limited resources, you can fund those priorities.
Great. Do either of you have any extra insight?
Yeah, so I would say great point. I had forgotten almost that everybody doesn't exist in a strong city manager form of government, which is what my form is. So West Valley City is a strong city manager form by election. So our voters selected that form of government when we incorporated 41, 2, 3, however many years ago now it's been. So strong city manager form, the budgeting process is still not too different from that. And definitely in West Valley, we're very data-driven and goal-oriented. The policies are set by our city council, and then the city manager executes on those policies from a budget perspective and otherwise. I am not an expert in budgeting. It's one of the things I wish I would have done back when I was in school was do, although they didn't really offer it the same way, do the dual track, either MPA or MBA, because I'm all self-taught on all the finance stuff. And that is a challenge for sure. It has been a challenge for me, something that I've appreciated and have learned, had the ability to learn, but I sure wish I had a little bit of school behind me in that area. So it's been interesting. The one thing that's striking to me about the budget process, coming at it cold and as a lawyer, is it's all the time. There's no budget season. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. Just the minute you get a budget sealed and delivered and voted on by city council, you're about 2 weeks and then you're starting the process again. And so it's a pretty constant round of effort for sure. And that was surprising to me, something that I didn't know when I started into the management areas. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, and Park City is very similar to West Valley. We have a city manager form of government. And the only thing I would add that, neither of you mentioned, you may have this, is that we have a staff-driven results committee. And so as the different department heads are submitting budget requests, it goes through this internal committee that evaluates the request based on the community set priorities and council approved priorities. And all of the requests get scored in order to then end up in the city manager's budget that is then approved by city council. So it's kind of a nice way to engage the staff into the bigger picture of what's going on, because they learn about what the other department's needs are and kind of judge that based on the relationship. So that's probably the only difference, or the only thing I could add. Yeah.
Thank you. And then to go off of that, Nicole, can you talk about economic development and your role with that within West Valley?
Sure, yeah, so West Valley is really interesting. When we incorporated, we're a pretty young city, so it was 1980. 42 years? You see, I'm not math, girl. So when we incorporated, we were about 60% developed, which is kind of an unusual thing for a city as well. We're a large city, second largest city by population, 35 square miles. So 60% of that was developed at the time and developed under county land use regulations. Part of the reason we incorporated was development and the issues surrounding that, what makes a community and what the people in the area wanted for their community. Because we were 60% developed and because of the life cycle of things, there was a lot of redevelopment to do. So even still today, I think we're the city that has the most redevelopment areas, now called community development areas. Yeah. The statute has changed multiple times, but basically redevelopment areas. We at one time had 19. Which was double digits more than the next city in line. People may be catching up as some of ours fall off. And we've been able to accomplish quite a few of those goals. But economic development in the city and redevelopment, kind of two different things. The other thing we've worked really hard to do in West Valley is have a balanced community from a residential perspective, but also we needed jobs, and jobs close to our residents, and jobs that were beneficial to our residents. And in order to have a nice, stable tax base, it's good to have a balance of residential and commercial and industrial. And so we really set priorities towards that. And at the start of my economic development time, it was the hot button topic. It was the thing we were really striving for, both to bring companies to our city and also jobs, and do that in a way that was sustainable and long-term for our city. So some of the best kept secrets about West Valley, we have 6,000 businesses ranging from ma and pa all the way up to Fortune 100. We have some of the typical businesses that you hear around. We have an Amazon facility, we've got backcountry Hexcel, which I'm sure you've heard of, is the largest carbon fiber manufacturer. Does a lot of the government contracts and also large airline contracts. If you've never seen carbon fiber made, that's worth a trip. You have to get special permission to go into that facility, but it's a pretty impressive facility and a pretty impressive manufacturing function. We also have Frito-Lay, so sometimes you'll smell, if you're at USANA for a concert, sometimes you'll smell fresh chips baked. That one was before my time. But so very robust economic development system. We also really are intent on keeping the businesses that we get to come to the city. So we have what we call a concierge service for our businesses and some business development folks that really take care to be engaged and to know the businesses in our city and understand their needs. And so we've been very successful that way. Redevelopment, very difficult, very heavy lift in West Valley. So fun and such a wonderful time in my career, even though it was the hardest time in my career. I enjoyed that a lot and enjoyed you can never make that happen, or this will never happen here, or you can never bring that to this spot. I love doing that stuff and proving people wrong, and it took a lot of lift and a great team, wonderful city and an awesome city council, but we were able to accomplish many of those goals. So that's kind of what it looks like in West Valley.
Awesome. And so with the COVID-19 pandemic, I think we've all kind of seen crisis management and emergency management come forth, and then with the earthquake that happened around that same time too. So what is the city's responsibility during an emergency, and how did your cities kind of take that on?
I can start with that. So definitely pandemic, earthquake, and windstorm all in 2020. We got to use our emergency management plans for sure. In our community, I'll start with a windstorm because that was the shortest lived and kind of most intense response. We have, Holiday has a lot of old growth trees. And that windstorm took out a lot of them. So what we had were a lot of debris. And that was something we really hadn't, in terms of crises we had planned for. A windstorm taking down trees and power lines with them was not on our list. So that involved initially a fire and police and our internal staff thinking about, okay, what can we do really quickly? And it felt like one of those exercises, you know, you're on an island with four items, what do you do with them? That was really kind of the exercise we went through. We were fortunate because a lot of communities were in the same place, and we got in line early for dumpsters to collect the debris. I think some other communities had to wait longer because that's a fixed resource, and there are only so many of those dumpsters. But what we ended up doing, we have a lot of church groups collected those, had debris removing parties basically, and then as a city we provided a place for people to bring that debris to. And in the scheme of 2020, that is an event I can look to with some pride for our quick response. The pandemic was also totally unexpected, at least in Holiday. And we learned quickly that we were technologically behind. But within a couple of weeks had moved our phone system entirely to a system we could access through our computers, and had moved 75% of our staff, which is small, to a remote setting. We pretty quickly discovered that there were some positions where it was really tough to maintain that, and that our building inspectors, planning, it just was almost impossible to continue that remotely. So we adapted, and that has really been the takeaway from the last 2 years in terms of crisis response is adaptation, learning as you go.
I can add a couple things. I started my job in Park City on March 30th of 2020. So I kind of dealt with closing down all the theaters at Salt Lake County Arts and Culture, and then moved over to Park City, where they had kind of started working on COVID adjustments. And like you, there was a big tech learning curve. We quickly got city council meetings online. There were a lot of glitches early on. And now, just fast forwarding, the community was so much more engaged with having that online option, and we're starting to do in person again. And the community still wants the online option, and doing the hybrid thing has been really challenging. It's a whole different tech setup. But one thing we decided on early on in Park City was that we were going to follow the lead of Summit County Health Department. Park City being, the most populous, most visited municipality within Summit County. It all feels like Park City. You come into Kimball Junction, people think you're in Park City, but you're actually not. Park City city limits are much tighter. But we didn't want to have any confusion or inconsistencies, so we partnered with Summit County, but we really followed the lead of that health department, and that proved to be a really good decision.
I would say, so I've had the great opportunity and also sometimes daunting opportunity to be engaged in what I would term emergency or crisis management in West Valley almost my whole career, probably at least 15 years, very proactively in various positions, right? So sometimes I'm the head of the Emergency Operations Center. Sometimes I'm responsible for government relations during those emergencies. Sometimes press and PR early on. There are some PR days where we didn't have PR help that I am appalled by how things went, because I was running that show and it was not good. I should not have been doing that, and it was just all we had. But the one thing that I would take away from all of these, and I could tell stories about this stuff all day long, that just unbelievable stories you wouldn't believe if I told you, if I didn't have pictures of things that we've dealt with in the city. But what I have learned in spades is that when it comes to emergency management and crisis management at the city government and employee level, that you will find that people will do whatever needs to be done, but they like to do that only after they feel safe, meaning they need a leader or a set of leaders who are calm and who are confident and who are present and who are happy, even when it's bad. And some days it's bad. And if you react in the normal human way, if you're gonna do that, you better go to the ladies' room or men's room and do that in private, because people need a leader. And they need a set of leaders who can take a deep breath, who can recognize the badness and don't pretend like it's not bad. I'm not suggesting that, because obviously people can see through that. But someone who can square up their shoulders and soldier on in a way that is a sort of a leadership path, but also kind of a melting of the stress and excess trouble that comes during those times, then you will have a group of employees and a group of residents that you guys have experienced that will come together and they will follow. And truly, in real crisis time and in real emergency time, that's what people need. And you have to find a way to do that, because if you're having to come apart right along with the rest of them, it's not good. And it's not good for community, it's not good for the government, it's not good for employees. And so I have watched that. I've had great mentors who have been examples to me of that, and I've had the opportunity to be that as well, or try to be that. I don't know. I'm probably the most dramatic of all in our city executive staff level, but boy, does it ever make a difference. And it's one thing that over the years I've really learned, and that I would take away is in that time when your human nature kicks in and you want to freak out, you got to take a deep breath and square it up and lead out. And people will follow.
Thank you. So moving on to just the roles of city management within a city, how do you work with elected officials, and how does that kind of mold your day-to-day work?
Yeah, sure. I often tell the story about Park City because I did a little bit of work in Park City on the side, and their engagement with their elected officials is so interesting to me. So I can't wait to hear about that. But
It's the only thing I know. So I don't know how I find it interesting.
from our perspective, from my perspective in West Valley, the very best way to engage and interact with elected officials, and this goes to me also with our citizenry and our residents, is to try to understand their perspective and their needs, and try to see through their eyes why they might be requesting something or going down a particular path or asking for a shift in policy or something like that. I just think it's been helpful for me to engage with our elected officials by understanding what it's like to be an elected official on Saturday afternoon at the grocery store, okay? And if you haven't done that, or if you haven't heard what it's like to be that, it's something else. And to not have a full understanding or perspective of that, I think is, it's difficult to feel what it feels like. And it's a true calling, and being an elected official is, I think, more difficult today than ever, but also something that's so necessary that if we as non-elected officials can provide good support and help them have something to say to the question at the grocery store on Saturday, so that they can help a resident or constituent that might be approaching them with information and facts and help them be successful. That's been how we've tried to operate, how I personally try to operate, and it helps me understand, because sometimes you wonder, as an appointed official working for the elected body, you think, I don't know what's going on right now. What is happening? Why are we having this conversation? And it seems out of what you do. But the other thing that I always have to remind myself is I live this every single day. And oftentimes our council members are living this on Tuesday nights and maybe Saturdays at the grocery store when their constituents are talking to them, and they're not digging into the budget numbers necessarily, although certainly council members do that, but maybe not on a 10-hour-a-day basis like we might. It's not their lives. And so for me, that's been one of the things that's been helpful, just to think to myself, I wonder what it's like to be this council member, and what is he or she facing that's making them come at this idea in that way. And that's kind of been my process.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what you think is so interesting about Park City, but I'll say
it's so great. Oh yeah, I'll tell you when you say it, and then I'll tell you what I love about Park City.
So Park City is a population of 8,000 people, full-time residents. But you know what we do servicing-wise, we have 4 million visitors a year. So it definitely feels like more than that. On any given weekend, busy weekend, we could have 100,000 people in town. So the council is very focused on full-time residents, but we also understand that we have a spotlight on us. And so because it's a small community, everybody pretty much knows each other. The council and the staff talk to each other a lot, and there's a lot of interaction. And I was quite surprised by that coming from Salt Lake County, because I barely interacted with the elected officials in my role at Salt Lake County. And that can be a good thing, although I have had council members email my parking manager asking for a statistic on something, and my parking manager just gave it blindly without getting any context, and suddenly that went to this other place that it didn't need to go. So we've had to create some kind of boundaries, allowing them to still have the relationship, but just run it by me if you hear from one of the council members, and let's make sure we understand what the question really is that they're asking. This year, we have a new mayor who was on city council before, so she's seasoned, but she's in a new position. And we have 3 brand new council members out of a total of 5. And so we are going through a major learning curve with them. They're all people that have lived in Park City for a while, so they know the town, but They don't know all the behind-the-scenes stuff. They haven't paid attention. When you're starting to run for office, you attend council meetings, but you probably never attended to them before. And so there's a lot of catching up to do, and it's really important that we do that and give them the information in bite-sized pieces so that they can talk at the grocery store, for sure. And that's exhausting right now. There's a lot of education and awareness building with our council, but it's going to pay off. It's challenging right now.
Yeah, amen to everything the two of you said. I'd add just a couple of things, and one is kind of to your point about the grocery store conversations, is anticipating what those topics might be around. Yeah. And sometimes that's outside of the council role, but it is something that residents are going to be really interested in. So walking that fine line of, I'm going to share something, and you don't really, there's not really anything you can do with this information. I just want you to be prepared. And that also, the other word I'm going to use is trust, because I think the more information that gets shared in that context of what is the life of an elected official like, builds trust and makes for better outcomes, but I think makes our jobs easier as well.
Thank you. So within city management, how do you balance public interests, especially when there are competing interests or special interests?
I'd love to learn from you too.
I was going to say, this is another room where Park City is amazing.
We have a lot of very engaged residents.
Absolutely.
Very engaged.
Yeah.
And they are, we have this thing right now where we have a lot of traffic. If any of you have been up there to ski or to come up in the summer, the traffic is insane. Our community has complained about traffic for 30 years, and every year it gets worse. So we have doing a lot of outreach in neighborhoods, trying to understand what they want with regard to traffic calming and preventing people from cutting through the neighborhood to get to the busier streets. And pretty much every neighborhood meeting we have 50% of the neighbors that want one thing and 50% want another thing. So it is a balance, and I haven't quite cracked it. So please let me know.
So I would just say that I think all interests are competing interests. And I'm thinking of an example that I can share, which is, so we do a community survey every couple of years. And one thing our residents have identified as a priority are more recreational opportunities, particularly more trails. And that is, I'd say, close to 50% of our residents are really interested in trails. And so we're an older community. We have all of these canals that flow through the city that are owned by Salt Lake City, and they are willing to partner with us on adding some of trails adjacent to their canal system. And what we hear from residents when we talk about that is, but not here.
Yeah.
Like, these are close to my house, and we don't want other people, even other city residents, coming here. This is a beautiful amenity that I want to use. I think sincerely they're interested in a trail system for the city. They just don't want it to impact them. And that is I think those are legitimate concerns that they have, and we'll work to try and address some of those concerns, but that, in a nutshell, is some of the difficulty we have.
Yeah. So again, I could tell, like I know my co-panelists here I could tell so many stories about this. It's a really interesting topic and great question. One of the things that has been a recent thing that we've done in West Valley that I think has helped us with this, truthfully, is so we are almost 150. The census actually says we're 140,000, but I would submit to you we're at least 150,000, maybe more. So we're a big city, and as you probably are well aware, the minority majority city. So we're the most diverse city in the state as well, and have been for a long time. The other thing that we have come to learn about our residents in generality is that they're very, very happy to be here and happy to live in the city and in the neighborhood that they live in. And so we don't have a lot of community engagement, even when we proactively try to engage. And so one of the things that's been so awesome of my whole career, one of the things that's been so great is a program that we started called Operation My Hometown. And it started in kind of a circuitous way right before the pandemic hit. And we kept it going all through the pandemic. But what that program has offered is a home by home, resident by resident interaction with the city. And we just have an area of our city that's the pilot area that we've started, but that's now grown to almost 10,000 homes. So it's about 40,000 people. And if I personally couldn't, if you picked an address on a map in that area, if I didn't personally know that person, I could, or what was happening in that home, I could find out very, very quickly within a few minutes. And what that has done is it has helped us really dial in the things that the residents want from a city, from their city, the things that they want for their neighborhoods and for their small, sort of smallish areas, you know, their 10 and 15 houses around them and what matters to them. And it's allowed for engagement in a way that we historically really have not had the opportunity to have, and it has been amazing and awesome. And what it's given us really the opportunity to do is meld the things that are available in our community to the people who want that particular item and or service or help, and them being willing to take. So one just quick story about that. In this particular pilot area, we had $1 million to spend on home improvements from CDBG. And we sent out flyers, we sent people door to door, basically a grant program. There's no, you don't put the lien on your house. Hey, here's some $30,000. Let's put a new roof on your house and a new furnace, and let's do some improvement. And we were able to provide exactly zero of that $1 million. And this was 1 year before we started this program. So in the same area, we happened to pick the same area just by coincidence. In the same area, fast forward to Operation My Hometown, we feel like we've built so much trust and had so much engagement there in a way that's really unique that we've subsequently, of course, been able to spend that and more and provide for that sustainable housing component to come to fruition. And so for us, that's been the key. I think that that program has made a real difference and uniquely happened to us over COVID, helped us understand a real way to engage with our residents. But it's been very rare for us over time, mostly because, and again, this is generalities, not every single one of our residents is totally happy and thrilled with city government all the time. But our residents are happy and generally okay with how the city does things. So to be able to make those connections has been very, very rewarding, and we hope to spread that to the whole city. So it's very cool.
Great, thank you all for sharing. I'm gonna ask one more question before I pass it over to the students. But what are the skills that you need or need to develop to work in public administration effectively?
Patience, communication, writing. And I would say writing is different now than it was when I was in school, where we wrote long papers. I think it is more about communicating succinctly. What can we put on a flyer, and how can we make that appealing for residents?
That's a good one.
In my role in Park City, I oversee most of the internal departments, so HR, IT, budget, finance, communications. And then other duties as assigned transportation over here. But one of the things that we've been working on is internal communications. And so I kind of think of myself as the glue that keeps everybody informed of what everybody else is doing, because there's always overlap between engineering and planning and building and economic development and transportation planning. And a lot of times they just are so busy that they forget to talk to each other. And so I've kind of taken that on as a pet project, and I think it's really, really important. So just to be able to look and see what dots you can connect to make the city that much more effective.
So I agree with all of that. I would say after all these years, and basically from a personal level, I think the skill besides math and finance that I had to hone for this job is truly like a spirit of compassion and cooperation. And maybe that sounds a little bit unusual, or maybe that's a different answer than you're expecting. For sure, learn math, and for sure, learn finance, because that's hard to self-educate on. But I say compassion and the spirit of compromise or ability to work together, because I do see a lack of that in recent years, and what I hope is a resurgence, or soon to be a resurgence, in the ability to see things from another perspective, the ability to work through problems in a way that is connecting instead of disconnecting. And I think that's a skill, honestly. I think it's really difficult to be able to say, I understand where you're coming from. I might not agree, or in fact, I don't agree, but let's talk it out and work together. And I hope that in this sector that we can see a resurgence of that, because I really think that will be the way things need to be in the future, because I just think things are going to get much more difficult every year with regards to local government and public sector things, and the issues are difficult. And if you lack that skill truly, if you're faking that skill, it makes it hard to be successful. So I think however you hone that, and there are lots of ways to do that, that's what I've had to really buff up on and learn to train myself to see in every situation.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to pass the mic over and get on to some more questions.
All right, so we've actually gotten to the portion where you guys can ask some questions. So if you can just raise your hand, and I will pass your questions on. So, yes.
So my question is about Park City and traffic. Specifically, what has Park City been doing to manage traffic more effectively as the population and guest visitation increase? And which aspect of traffic management has been most effective?
So we have a traffic team internally that is made up of people from all the different departments that are affected: police, emergency management, parking, special events management, communications, and several other departments. And we meet weekly. We also have a traffic operations center that is based at the police station, and we have feeds from the UDOT cameras on all the traffic lights, so we can see what's going on in town. And we also have the ability to control the signals. So when we see things building up, we can change the signals in town. This is just on 224 and 248, as they come into the city. Mostly we use that for transit priority, because we're really pushing. We want people to ride transit and not bring in a bunch of single occupancy vehicles, and that's super challenging in this area. People love their cars. But we're making some inroads. I don't know if you guys heard, but we had quite a public outcry 2 weeks ago at one of our council meetings, where we had an hour and a half of public input with residents really outraged about how Vail is running Park City Mountain Base area, and it just traffic cutting through neighborhoods and super frustrated. So we got together a group of staff and met with Vail staff and collaborated and came up with some ways that we might be able to help circulation. And we did that. We did a little experiment the weekend before President's, and then we put it into full practice over President's weekend, and it's still being done right now. And we made significant strides. We cut transit time in half of what it took for the bus to go up and circulate through that base area and come back out, which means also that the cars are mostly moving faster too, although we did prioritize transit. So there's some backup with the cars, but we're okay with that. We want to incentivize people to ride transit. So we're going to do an analysis after President's Week's over and see, if there's some data that can really prove out what worked and what didn't. It's been a good collaboration with Vail, and there's definitely more we can do. There's bigger projects that we're working on, but what we're recognizing is that the ski traffic is really something that is the root of the problem right now. Does that answer your question?
Thank you for that. Anyone else has a question? Oh.
Do I need to use it? Yes. Okay. Thank you for being here. My question is, there always seems to be like a new crisis going on in the federal government or in the population that we live in. How does that come down to the local level? And do you feel like it's important to stress things that are more local in your job?
That's a good question. It does seem like a crisis a day, especially during the legislative session. Yeah. Let's see. So I am a big local government believer, probably because it's been my whole career, right? So I see the government closest to the people really is impactful. So I do feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect in my mind, in the sense that there could be a crisis even in Salt Lake County, and it's like our city, it just is almost blind to it in a lot of ways. We just go about our business, and it's not impactful like that for us, even though it's a big deal, maybe at the county level, or maybe for other cities in Salt Lake County, or maybe we're the one with the crisis that day, right? Or that week, or whatever it is. And so from my perspective, I think that people, for the most part, I don't think this 100%, but for the most part, I think we as people just function at our level, right? We function in our neighborhoods, we function at the places we frequent for lunch and for workout and all of those things, and that's really where, for the most part, short of reading the news or seeing the Twitter feed, that's where we live, so to speak. And so I do think that it's important to kind of have a hold of it at the local level, and to recognize that, for the most part, my 150,000 folks are living at that level. And do they know about Ukraine? Probably. They probably know what's going on there, but are they worried? Now, the pandemic, I will say, is an interesting study in this exact issue. And it has been fascinating. Again, I think we could probably spend 10 hours on what it's been like at local government to deal with the pandemic, because it's crazy. Like crazy every day. And that's a situation where all levels, and it's so interesting to look back, and as I'm sure you guys will have classes on this, and as people start to study it, looking back from today backwards for 2 years, understanding that truly did have an impact on literally every person at every stage in life and at every level of existence is something else. And it's been an interesting study, I think, in that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've seen a lot of increasing population along the Wasatch Fault very quickly. What's local government doing? What's local government doing to help address the concerns that a potential natural disaster could happen that would impact far more people than maybe are currently projected?
That's also a great question.
That is a great question.
I can add a couple things. And, I don't know if y'all remember, late last summer we had a pretty big fire on I-80 that crossed over and came into Summit County. And our emergency management community does such a good job of communicating with each other, and was able to get the potentially threatened homeowners to evacuate, and we didn't lose any property. We got a handle on that fire, but it has, as more and more development happens in the Park City area, we are thinking about should we be doing evacuation drills with the community? What about our water supply? Are we going to have enough? So those are kind of things that we think about as new developments come up and go through the planning process. There's that added layer to make sure that we're thinking about those things.
Yeah, I agree. I think we practice for sure. And nothing exists in a vacuum. So as Sarah alluded to, part of looking at new development involves changes in our building codes, and for both development and redevelopment, and those come with a price tag as well. So in an area where we also have an affordable housing crisis, we're always trying to balance those two competing values, knowing that we are going to see a major earthquake at some point, maybe in our lifetimes, and knowing that we have another crisis right now as well.
Yeah, I think for me, and I'll just refer back to my hometown, it was an interesting thing in our city when the earthquake happened. And we did have some damage. We had some pretty significant damage on the west side of our city, in particular with some mobile homes that had been set on faulty foundations. But what was so interesting to me, and what I think we are doing the most of from an emergency planning perspective, is within 10 minutes. So you'll recall I said sometimes I'm the emergency operations center, kind of like head of that. I don't know what we call me, but sometimes I'm the boss of that, right? And that's all about communication and information when you open that up when an emergency happens. One of the greatest things that has ever occurred to me, and that came from my hometown, was that day. And you'll remember, West Valley's 35 square miles, so big city, lots to cover and lots to assess when something like that happens. My hometown area, I had a full understanding of all 1,000 homes in that first pilot area within 10 minutes of the earthquake. The process that we'd set up in that little area, with the neighbors taking care of neighbors, and how they reported to each other, and the fact that they did report to each other. We hadn't suggested that or trained for that. We'd set up that process for a whole different purpose, but within 10 minutes, I had a full rundown of what was happening in that area and what assets were needed. And I was the star of the EOC that day, because the rest of the assessment just took forever. And so it's a great example of also recognizing that we as local government can do a lot of things, but we literally can almost do nothing during a very big emergency like that. And helping our folks understand that no one is coming. We want to come. We will do our best, and we have heroes, guys. Those fire and police folks and our emergency response teams, they are straight heroes. And they will leave their families and not sleep for days to help. But the fact of the matter is, in a big situation like that, no one's coming, because we can't. We can't get there fast enough. We can't cover everyone. And so helping people understand that you have to take care of yourself and your family and your neighbors. And you're gonna have to do that no matter what happens. That's been our biggest push after we had this earthquake situation happen, and understanding how that could work, and that it's just gonna have to work. I think that's the biggest thing that we've done. Mm-hmm. Recognizing that we want to, but the reality is that it's just not gonna work that way. So it's gonna be a long time before someone gets to you. and you just have to handle it.
Thank you. I think we have time for about 1 or 2 more questions. Did we have anybody over here with their, if you can raise your hand? Or, okay.
Hi, I thought it was so interesting how you guys talked about partnering with other cities, like with like the Trailhead program. I was wondering if you could all speak more on like partnerships that you've had with either the state, local, or federal government.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that because Holiday is a community that partners for a lot of our services. We partner with other cities as part of Unified Fire and Unified Police. And that both of those models really work because of those partnerships. And we're able, as a community of 30,000 that is primarily residential, we get a level of service, particularly on the police side, that we couldn't afford by ourselves. So we have the ability for, and they're fairly rare in our community, but we have the ability for a SWAT response if we need it. We have the ability for fire investigation at a level that we wouldn't be able to pay for just for ourselves. And I think that has been a really efficient choice for our city and one I see us sticking with.
Amen.
All right, I think we have time for 1 more question if anyone has one. No? Okay. Well, all right then. Well, thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panelists one more time. Thank you so much for coming in. You have a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.